Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to this webinar where we're going to look at ISO 13485 2016 and give you a general overview of the changes in the document and specifically look at some of the aspects that impact product realization. Obviously, ISO 13485 is a huge change to what's going forward, so we'll be just touching on things here, and hopefully this will give you a background to go forward and investigate some of the changes in more detail yourself. Let me introduce myself. My name is Richard Young. I work for Acclaim Biomedical Consulting. You can see my details here on the screen. If you've got any questions or want to get in contact regarding ISO 13485 following this webinar, please feel free to contact myself or, if you require training, the team at MDTI. So, on to the revision of the standard. I think firstly we need to note that probably one of the most significant changes for me is the deviation between ISO 13485 and ISO 9001. The 2015 version of ISO 9001 has sort of changed quite significantly from previous versions, and that this deviation means that the high level structure is not the same between the two documents at all now. The 13485 document is certainly more focused on documentation and regulatory compliance, whereas ISO 9001 still remains a more general standard which can be broadly applied across a range of industries, whether they be regulated or not. This brings the first challenge to an organisation in looking at ISO 13485 and transforming themselves into the new system. Strategically, what standard should you be using? I'm advising my clients to look for 13485, especially the 2016 version as it becomes available through your notified bodies, both in your manufacturing operations and in critical suppliers who are supplying to you, where ISO 9000 may be certainly continue to be appropriate with suitable controls through contracts and so on for the wider distribution organisation or affiliated sales offices that may be scattered throughout the world. ISO 13485 brings increased emphasis to several areas as we go forward. And I think notably one of those is the emphasis on how clear documentation must be and how it needs to be supported by evidence. And by this I mean it's not going to be acceptable under the new standard for us to declare we've maybe had a meeting. We'll need to provide the evidence that this happened, where it happened and who attended it and what was actually said. So we'll be looking for some sort of signed minutes which can help support those going forward. Also, I think it's very important to note is that ISO 13485 will be the standard on which the International Medical Device Regulatory Forum is basing their medical device single audit program. This is a program that's in pilot at the moment, due to finish by the end of this year, and it basically allows registered companies to have a single audit which can be passed on to all regulatory authorities who may want to audit that facility. So quite a powerful thing, not directly impacting 13485 in the European situation as it fits in with the new medical device regulations, but I think it certainly simplifies the landscape going forwards. So 13485 2016 is going to be sort of the basis of regulatory enforcement and auditing going forwards by most of the major competent authorities in the world. So it needs to be taken on board from that perspective as well. And I think the final thing that really strikes me at the very top level is how closely the proposed text and terminology of the new European medical device regulations and IVD regulations fits in with the ISO 13485 language and concept. So there's a very close synergy there between them. And when those regulations are released and come into force, which should be in the next few months, we hope, these really go hand in hand. So part of your preparation strategically for converting over to the new regulations, I think 13485 in the 2016 format is strategically a good option to be looking at to form the foundation for that conversion. So the new standard adds a lot of language in, which is very similar to the language that's used in the new proposed text of regulations. Here's some of it here. Let's pick out some important ones here. We have definitions of distributor and importer, which fall under the heading of economic operators in the new regulations. There's a real emphasis and terminology around the concept of life cycles, and that's particularly important when you're looking at the use of the product and maybe human factors and usability, which we'll discuss a bit later. We have specific terminology around post-market surveillance, performance evaluation, and more terms associated with risk and risk management. So very, very close alignment here, and I think that's intentional and something we need to consider going forwards. Of course, the current 2016 version of the standard has been released with in an EN version, which normatively references the existing directives as they stand today. I would expect this to be re-released with new Annex Z documents, probably sort of 2018, 2019, but I don't imagine the core text will change much there. So, going through the sections of the new standard. General requirements. There is an increased focus on defining the role of the organisation, so it's very well laid out in this section. And I think strategically, look here, that there's a lot of focus on outsourced processes. I think a number of organisations, many organisations now, do go beyond the traditional outsourcing of packaging and maybe sterilisation, subcontracting services, and are really pushing more of these functions and services out to third-party organisations with specialties in certain areas. We're going to have to keep control of those. So keeping control of them through contracts, through audits and so on. And with this emphasis comes maybe some of the benefits of the Medical Device Single Audit Program, MDSAP. You know, would you strategically accept a company who had been audited to that system? Would they be adequate for your purposes going forwards? Probably something you need to consider. My personal opinion is yes, that can make sense and reduces the burden on your supplier quality side of things. So I'd certainly look at that very closely. There's an emphasis in general requirements on computer software, and in fact it must be validated. And this is currently being interpreted as more emphasis on the validation of things like ERP systems or elements that bring traceability or material control to an organisation or impact the manufacturing stream. So not just the validation of specific bits of components and machinery, although that still remains important, but sort of looking at the supporting systems that make manufacturing happen. We have a revised definition of obsolete documents and how we have to hold on to them. And we have revised wording on for the control, identification, storage, retrieval and retention of quality records, with the period of retention being defined as 10 years after the sale of the last product. Now, so that's getting a bit more onerous. as is the expectation with how quickly you can get to records, whether they be obsolete or not. I think this one is potentially driving companies to begin, who haven't already gone there, to begin considering some sort of electronic quality management system and electronic document storage that really facilitates that process going forward. It's not mandatory, but it certainly raises a strategic flag that you should be considering. Management responsibility. This hasn't changed really hugely here, but we do see increased emphasis on management, understanding the customer's requirements, and really getting a little bit more into being engaged with the regulatory changes and requirements that happen within the markets that your company services. So we have a reword of the quality objectives. We need to meet regulatory requirements throughout all organisational levels. That's a bit of a change. It's quite specific. And we have the idea that we have to nominate a specific person for post-production activities or post-market, which may include elements like complaints or post-market surveillance. That's as particularly interesting as that's a subsection of the role defined for a qualified person under the draft text of the new European regulation. So a real synergy happening there, and this emphasis on post-market activities. I think the general feeling here is it's getting increasingly difficult to let a product out into the market and not follow it. Post-markets and post-market data is going to be of increasing importance to all organisations in the future, and an area we really need to concentrate on. We move on to resource management. As we've always had, we have an emphasis on people having the right makeup of skills and experience to support the organisational goals. But there's some real emphasis that comes in here in the wording that we have to provide training or other actions to maintain competence, which is interesting. So the concept here that competence is something that needs to be maintained over the employment life of an individual. I think this is going to be particularly important to skills-based training activities. And then we bring in more solidly than maybe we've had before the concept of effectiveness check and this linkage with the risk associated with the work process. So higher risk products, we've got to take a bit more time to make sure that the individuals conducting a task are doing the job correctly and effectively. So I think a lot more emphasis on that training, those training elements, and that training effectiveness is going to be there. Many organisations are already doing this. Again, strategically look at it and look at ways of doing this, and ways maybe that these especially high risk processes can be monitored in such a way as to maybe obviate in some ways the need to follow up with specific individuals. There's clarification here on the resources as well, that we need to have procedures that document maintenance activities. We've had that, preventative maintenance already. But here we go a little bit more deep, and we say that we need to actually define within those procedures the inspection requirements that are associated with those maintenance activities. So we need to get right down to say exactly what we're doing to maintenance and what our expectation is. We can't just look at the oil, we need to say how clear it needs to be, for example. And we reiterated, I think, something that's been most of industry has been following: the work environment needs to be defined and needs to be appropriate for the functions that are happening in any particular work area. Then moving on to product realisation, I think this is one of the really important areas that is going to change. This is the impact area for me that I think is really showing the significant change in what's going on here. Firstly, we're looking to document a process of risk management throughout product realization with records. And I think the emphasis on throughout the product realization lifecycle is really going to move organizations away from conducting risk management as a last minute afterthought. I think the expectation from this is that risk management activities will start at the planning stage of a project or the delivery of a new product, and will follow throughout whatever sort of design cycle an organization uses, and needs to be seen basically as a design input that needs to be verified at the end. So we have a specific reference in the text, normative reference in the text of the new 13485 document to ISO 14971 risk management. So we've got that tie-in explicitly there. Now, interestingly, we also have a specific tie-in to IEC 62304, which is about software lifecycle processes. That's very interesting because there's a much increased emphasis on software documentation and testing development in the proposed text of the new regulations, and that's reflected here. And the standards really pushing you towards using this IEC document to control your software development and subsequent testing as a normal way of going about things. So big emphasis, if you've got a software containing product, really take notice of that and really get both of those standards going as early as possible in the development cycle, because I think it'll be very difficult to sell the documentation pack and the design dossier without that. So also within here we've got requirements for intended use, and the need and the idea here that we need to provide training to support safe and effective use of the products. That's a new thing as well. So what support are we going to provide our customers? We'll be thinking about that throughout the process. We have a new section in here that's quite interesting, which is 7.2.3.2, which is communication with regulatory authorities. And this is about product information, regulatory inquiries, complaints, and advisory. So this is your traditional role of your complaints coordinator, maybe job as a job title. Maybe slightly expanded here, but it's your quality departments that's saying that we need to have standards that help us communicate with the regulatory authorities. We also have planning for usability and safety requirements related to the intended use of the device is going to be of increasing importance here. Now, if you've been dealing, especially with more complicated products, into the US market over the last few years, you are familiar with this. The concept of usability engineering, human factors engineering is not a new one, but it's certainly a growing one, and that's really been captured in both the new regulations and ISO 13485, which are very similar to the FDA requirements. So we're looking at the application outputs of risk management, so we're looking to resolve those things. We're looking for, and we're looking to bring things together. And I'm suggesting here that you need some sort of traceability matrix to map your product requirements and so on, and your risk management requirements and the results of your hazards analysis and usability engineering to actual deliverables in your project. And to that end, ISO IEC 62366 is the third document that's referenced in the text of 13485 as a critical document for development purposes. Basically, all products have a usability engineering element, whether it be assessment of the training that's provided and the information that may be provided instructions for use to the user at the most basic level, through to complicated user interfaces and so on at the highest level, and everything in between. So usability engineering is going to become an important bit of everybody's lives. So watch that one, and strategically I would engage in training on that one as soon as possible if you don't have those skills within your organisation already. We also have some specific references to the need for evaluation of the connection between your products and other products that may be in the use space while they're being used. And I think this is really looking at a realization that the medical environment is quite complicated these days. Lots of stuff goes on in it, and we need to be looking about the intended use environment, what's in it, and what connections our device makes, whether it be electronic or by the addition or connection to other products such as other lines and so on. At the most basic level, I think this underpins things like looking at alternative designs of lure connectors to avoid misconnections of devices and tragic accidents from those sorts of incidents. Again, emphasis here on traceability to design inputs. And then we have two more new sections that have been added into product realization. We have 7.3.8, which is talking about design and development transfer. And those of you who have delivered products subject to FDA audits are pretty familiar with design transfer as a concept. It's been around in the GMPs for a long time. But this is the transfer of designs and quality control tests and procedures and processes from development through to real manufacturing. And it's saying that we need to make sure this is done correctly and in a way that ensures the product is still representative of the one that may be the basis of our regulatory filings. So we need to make sure that's done competently. And lastly, but not leastly, we have a new section which is regarding design and development records, and it's saying that we need to basically look after them a lot better and keep them for a fairly significant period of time. That ends our presentation of this webinar. Thank you very much for your attention. I hope you found that useful, and we look forward to speaking to you in the future. Thank you very much.